welcome.
Thank you.
Good. We're so happy to have you. I'm so happy to have you.
I'm happy to be here. It's nice to see you.
Yeah. I feel like I've already got a connection to you because, well, we actually, I mean, we're very different. You're a musician, I'm an athlete, but we have a lot of shared passion. One of whom is wandering around the studio right now. You have just this passion for animals. And your feed is so beautiful because, you know, one day you're recording something and you're promoting, you know, a cause that you're passionate about. And then the next day there's Grace on that screen. And I think animals make us feel so loved, and
they do. Yeah, you know, I think that a lot of people prefer animals to humans a lot of the time. You know, you don't have to be a vegetarian to be an animal lover.
Yeah.
Most people, I think, love animals. Their animals are tender and vulnerable, and they need us.
And do you think animals have a soul?
Of course.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You know, from the smallest insect all the way to the biggest grizzly bear and hippopotamus.
I feel that more as I've gotten, I've had so many animals in my life. I normally have at least 2 dogs and a couple cats. So I think there's this joy and energy. Do you talk to your dogs?
Well, and I never noticed it more than when my last one.
Oh, Grace is talking to you though. Like you might be talking to that
one passed away. Can you stay here for a second? My last one passed away very naturally when he was 17. And one thing I noticed was how much I talked to him. And it was glaringly obvious. I talked to him constantly. And with this one, when I'm driving. I talk to her constantly when I'm driving. She has to listen to me, you know, talk to the other drivers. And
to the other drivers, well,
yeah, I don't use a lot of expletives, believe it or not. But I just have a running commentary explaining to her that they can be unintelligent.
So there's a company and an energy that animals bring to the home that I've come to really deepen. And I feel like my animals, when I'm around animals, they're almost talking to me and calming me sometimes when I'm agitated or nervous. And picking up a dog or snuggling with the dog, it just so grounding.
It is. Yeah, it is.
Bif, when I think about you, I think about a woman who is incredibly resilient and is the master of reinvention and curiosity and moving to sort of that next place in her life.
He's very nice.
You've got so many things. I mean, you're an artist, you're a musician, you've acted, you're an activist. You now have a talent management company. So you got a lot of stuff to talk about. Can we start with your music a little bit?
Well, you know, music is a part of a performing arts life that I've been very, very lucky to live. I was a theater major initially, and I had no intention of being a musician ever, never. I still don't, actually. I mean, I started out as a ballerina. I was in ballet for 13 years.
Yeah.
Before I went into theater in university. And, you know, it was a dude. You know, it was a hot guy who was a drummer in a band.
Okay.
It was a dude, a hot guy in a band who was a drummer. And, of course, naturally, I married him. But he was a drummer in a band, and their singer quit. And it was really that simple. And, you know, we had a shared interests about social justice and vegetarianism and the bands that we liked. And, you know, being an 18-year-old in Winnipeg.
A married 18-year-old.
19 when I was married to him. Yeah, it lasted 6 months. But to learn professionalism, I stayed in the band, of course. And then we moved to Vancouver. And, you know, it was the right road for me. Yeah. To embark on that aspect of the performing arts. And that's really how I looked at being in music. It's just a facet of being a performer. And it's really all I've ever done. I've only ever been a performer. I kind of looked at it like,
but you went really far with your music. I mean,
I think that my biggest years are still ahead of me. And that's one thing I've always kind of, as someone who is still a female, a woman who is still aging and on the stage. So it's not like, it's not like I can just, quietly go about my job. It's like I'm still getting older. I have to determine what that's going to be like.
Yeah.
And, I kind of look at it with a lot of awe and wonder because I think it's funny, because I think it's very funny getting older. I love being in my 50s and I love determining what that's going to look like, especially in this era that we live in, when we're very able to determine what that looks like. There's a bit of a rebel in me that refuses to age a certain way that a lot of my peers are aging.
Yeah, you don't want it imposed upon you. I mean, I don't want it imposed upon me.
Yeah, it's annoying.
It's annoying. It is annoying. And it's also, for me, I think when I was an athlete, people still identify me as an athlete. I went to the Olympics. This is what I did. But of course, all of our lives have so many other facets.
Yeah.
And when I was raising my kids and, speaking and traveling, that was one really beautiful chapter of my life. And that brought me into my late 40s, but now well into my 50s, almost 60 for me, which I look as an exciting time. And I'm with you.
Yeah.
We're allowed to define it the way that we want to. And I feel a liberation. I mean, I get a feeling, we'll talk about it a little bit, but I get a feeling that you were always pretty strong and liberated in your opinions and your ideas and your creativity. For me, it's taken a lot longer. I feel that my 50s so far has been my most amazing decade in terms of freedom and the freedom to really be who I am. A lot of that was telling my story, writing my book 10 years ago. I've been keeping secrets about my life. And when I let go of that and I sort of stood in my truth and my experience, a lot of around mental health, I experienced this weightlessness and this freedom. And it is so interesting to be a woman in her 50s at this time in history, because I think we're not ready. I'm sure not ready to say, I'm retiring, or I'm letting go of my passions, or I'm going to start learning how to play card games. Not that there's anything wrong with cards. There's a lot ahead. So tell me what's ahead for you.
Well, and I think it's interesting too, because they say that men in their 50s, for example, their biggest earning years are ahead of them. And so I've always had that nugget that in my mind, and I think, well, why isn't the same thing true for women? And I've always kind of reserved it. Our generation cannot retire. And so I look at my age group, my demographic of women. I don't know anyone who can retire. The people don't retire anymore. They cannot. And so,
unless there's two incomes in the family and they've had a nest egg and all those things, but you're talking about single women.
Anyone.
Okay.
Moving forward in this economy and just globally, I mean, I don't want to sound like a doomsday talker or anything, but it's more and more difficult. Less people can retire. So what does that look like for people who are aging? We have to believe, and we have to move forward thinking and hoping and really yearning passionately to keep working and to stay creative and to desire to have our biggest earning years ahead of us. And so creatively, I look at it that way. And I like how you use the word chapters, because it is really a different chapter ahead.
And so much is, at least in my life, it's been, around mindset, around challenging what is. When I was younger, I I rode with the men because the men helped bring me to another level, because I was the fastest woman. I was the fastest woman by a margin. And so I went and I sought another environment that was more challenging for me. And, I find as I learn and grow, I want to keep changing directions. I want to be learning new things. And the creativity, I remember hearing Jamie Lee Curtis say that she's in her 60s now, and that her 60s have been amazing. She's got a production company. She's produced a couple movies. Like, she got back to acting. And I just found that such a encouraging interview. And the expression of creativity, for me, being able to express myself creatively through my speaking, through my social channels, through Unsinkable. I mean, Unsinkable is a creative venture. It's a story sharing platform. We believe in the power of story sharing to change people's lives.
And it does.
Thank you.
It does.
Thank you.
Yeah, 100%.
And to not have that ability, to me would be like a kind of death, to lose that creativity. I get the sense that might be the same for you, because
100%
wildly creative.
Well, and creativity looks to, people think that creativity is only about either songwriting or book writing or painting or, some type of arts endeavor. But it can be, it can be anything.
Yeah.
It can be
starting a charity. It can be,
yeah.
I think people see themselves black and white, don't they? You're either creative or you're not.
Yeah. And I think that's a mistake. And I also think that women can, I can't speak for men, obviously, but I think women who are, their kids are grown or they are at a crossroads in their lives, they can really kind of make decisions based on where they're at today, as opposed to where they, identified themselves being 10 years ago.
Talking about longevity and reinvention, I was really impressed. Is it called Her Majesty?
Oh, Her Royal Majesty's Records.
Majesty Records. So, okay, but are you managing Billy Idol right now?
No.
Okay, because no. I was on there and I was okay, so tell me about your venture.
So Her Royal Majesty's Records was started in 1994.
Okay.
When I was just a wee pup. And it was really primarily because the record company I was signed to folded 2 weeks after my record came out, my first record. And there was nothing I could do. The distributor at the time was A&M Records in Canada. And they told my manager, "You're never going to get a girl with tattoos on the radio. You should just drop this girl." The record label folded.
Your tattoos.
Yeah. They were like, yeah, this is a real waste of time.
We're just ahead of
kind of thing. They were just like, yeah, this is kind of silly. And so Peter's been my manager almost 33 years now. And he just said, we can't get a record label in Canada, so we're just going to make one. Are you okay with that? And I'm like, I guess so. Yeah. And so we just made a record label. And he said, what do you want to call it? And I said, Her Royal Majesty's Records, which is actually silly because in the UK, we have to go with an acronym. We can't call it that because it's the Queen. Anyway, and that's all we ever did. Yeah, Her Royal Majesty's, that's all we ever did. And we just licensed it to different countries.
Okay.
And then we would go there and tour.
And that's why you're seeing other records on your website.
Yeah. And so what happened was over the years, back in the 90s, I signed a few I call them baby bands that I wanted to mentor, and just artists that I really liked and thought were amazing. And then I would take them on tour with me and, try and promote them that way. And that worked for a little while. It was really difficult. And it's a lot of responsibility. And, just because I think a band is amazing doesn't mean it'll translate. And it's very, very difficult unless you have, especially back then, we needed distributors like EMI or Atlantic or to try and help us push them out. And it was always a real challenge. And it was just very rewarding too.
Or difficult? Was it more difficult as a woman? I mean, I'm hoping to have Sarah McLaughlin actually on this podcast in our next season. And she's done a lot for female musicians and getting away from, that kind of that management and, music festivals that would only have like a couple women and, you know, obviously low fare and some other things. But you've also done a lot to promote women and to promote young talent.
I hope so. And I hope to keep doing it. I mean, you know, Sarah's great. You know, and being involved at all in Lilith Fair is something that is a real blessing for any artist. You know, it was so innovative when she was doing Lilith Fair, especially in the beginning, because there was nothing like it. And kind
of at a time where it was really male dominated.
But it still is today. Like, you know, I do festivals in summertime always. And it just depends on the genre, I find anyways, of music that you play. I find still in rock and hard rock, it's still a lot of guy bands, and they still wind up putting me on first on the bill. Even this summer, I'm first on the bill. And I never mind stuff like that because my band loves it. They get to eat all the catering. They get to go raid their dressing rooms.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're not tired. We play first. We do a really high energy show. And then the guys sit and eat pizza and drink their wine all night. And I get to go and sign merch, you know, and do stuff. So
so if you win, is you're still underestimated because
yes, and I like that a lot because it feels like back in the day that was my only superpower because it was very, you know, it was I never took it personally and I still don't. And now I find as a female, it's not just that I'm a female, it's that I'm older. And so now it's even more so.
Double layers of
mm-hmm. And that I still can't, no matter what, I can't take it personally, and I don't.
Well, it is interesting when I think back to sports and, you know, even in my career, various moments, we lived at a time where sexism was just normal. And, you know, whether it was my time when I was a runner before I was a rower and the cat calls that I would put up with at like 12 years old, you know, running down the street, and that somehow that was a license for men to harass me. I was really lucky that when I rode with the men's team, there was a lot of acceptance. But there was also this rivalry between the women's and the men's team, and the men absolutely felt their performances were more competitive and harder than the women's. And there was just that like default assumption. And I think even myself, I sometimes thought that, you know, I sometimes thought, oh yeah, no, the men's have more entries, or, you know, they're getting more attention, or whatever it was. And now to look back, it's interesting to be this age. And then looking back, I think about the boards I sat on and the guys that would, you know, be the only women in the boardroom, and the guys that would hit on me. Inappropriate comments. And I hate to say it, but I just brushed it off and laughed it off. And it's more now that I realize it was me too as well. Like that really made me angry when I thought of all the crap that, you know, I went through. And I don't think I had it that bad. I think in the music industry, I mean, you just hear it's notorious for objectifying and all.
Well, I have to drink my pop. Well, it's not pop. Sorry, water. Sorry, no, it's pop.
Good water. Tall Boy, one of our friends. This is his company, and you know what I love? Did you see what it says on the other side?
It's okay to be yourself. That's very good. I was coughing. I have very bad allergies with you. I've always found that it's kind of bad in the music industry, but bad is not the correct word. I think it's just very, it's common. I have a goddaughter who's 19, and she lives with me every summer. She goes to Queen's University, and her perspective is so different than mine. She just says, she's so sarcastic. She just kind of looks at me in disbelief and just goes, you didn't have to put up with it. She's like, people today don't put up with it. You guys put up with it. That's your problem. She's like, we don't put up with it. I'm like, well, it's easy for you to say, But when I was on stage, we couldn't just like leave the stage because someone yelled, "Show us your tits." And we were like, I'm so offended. And we would leave the stage because they just like that.
Another women's band. Or...
That's not what we would do. We had 45 minutes and that was it. Like, that's like, we couldn't leave the stage. You know, I'm the only girl. I still have 4 guys in my band who are worked just as hard to be there. I'm not going to like be some, you know, baby about it.
You know, there's moments, for me at least, when I look back at my life and my career. And, you know, I think part of this stage in life is that we get a little more reflective and we think about like, are there moments you kind of wish you'd had a different reaction? You had something that you could have said or done?
Yeah.
Because I was talking with another guest about this, and in a way, like, you are who you are at that age. You know, I was an Olympic rower. I was a keynote speaker. I was a mom. And in those moments, that was the most important thing. And you're a person with certain attributes at that time in your life. And then you evolve and you change and you morph. So just to kind of look back and say, I should have, is hard, right? But I do think of a few moments like that.
Well, my first wedding dress I wore on stage for my very first concert as a solo artist. And I wrote the C word across my chest. And my manager at the time had brought all these A&R, artists and repertoire guys from record labels to come and see his prized artist.
And you came out in a wedding dress?
Oh, with the C word written across it.
Yeah.
And I thought I was just such a feminist. You know, I think I was like 23 years old and I was shouting, "Take back the word. Take back the word." It was so important to me. And honestly, I look back now and I just think, what were you thinking? I just, you know, because now I think it's kind of comical, of course.
Yeah.
I wish I hadn't done that. But, you know, the other sad part is that there was no digital media.
Yeah.
Like,
well, could have been okay with that wedding.
Well, now I think it's quite funny.
It would have gone viral, probably, yeah.
Now I think it's quite funny. But at the time, he was just like, he was like, "What are you doing? Like, this is terrible." I'm like, "It's not terrible. This is excellent." Like, I thought it was such a good idea, but it was a terrible idea. It was an absolutely terrible idea.
Your need to express your beliefs, always permeated your music.
Yeah.
So that was just another example of it.
Yeah.
You've also gone through a lot with breast cancer.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about that journey?
Well, you know, I'm always going to be really grateful for that journey because it brought me into my volunteering. If I hadn't had breast cancer, I wouldn't have been, you know, loitering in the halls of the BC Cancer Agency so much. I didn't get to go through breast cancer as Beth Torbert. I had to go through breast cancer as Bif Naked. And so as a result of that, I kept getting asked to go sit with Susie for her first chemo, or I kept getting asked to go and can you come and see my daughter? She's losing her battle and she's in the palliative ward. Can you just come and say hi to her? And a lot of people were, you know, they aren't comfortable, for example, to do anything like that. And I'm the girl that can't say no, real popular in high school, by the way. And so I'm never going to say no. I'm never going to say no to an ask like that. And what I discovered, really by accident, was that I loved being in the palliative wards. I loved being in hospice, and that I had a passion for it. And I also discovered that there was a real need for volunteers in that patient population, and that people are afraid of death. They don't want to talk about it. That there was a void in the volunteerism for the family. And I never would have found that out. I never would have discovered it about myself if I hadn't been a patient, and if I hadn't been, if I hadn't had that proximity as a patient.
Oh, I get it, but it was also while you were fighting for your life. So you're going through chemo, you're experiencing all the things other people are experiencing, and you're being asked to give, to show up for that person, a kid who's not going to make it. Where did you get that resources from, like inner resources?
As a performer, again, to show up in that waiting room as Bif Naked, never as Beth Torworth, I go to chemo with my top hat and cane. It's like being Liza Minnelli.
Yeah.
I don't go there as a patient. I went. And that was also something I discovered about myself. I never would have known that otherwise. It was really, I was really remarkable. I also never thought I was going to die. I never had any fear. I blame my parents for that, which is a whole other conversation, because we just had a different, my parents were, my dad was a theologian as well as a dentist, and we just had a different take surrounding death. And
you're also a very positive person. I could see you just insisting on what you wanted, not what.
Yeah, it has never occurred to me that I was in any mortality danger or anything like that. I love science. I love hospitals. It was fascinating. I found the side effects were fascinating. On a cellular level, everything was fascinating. Like, it was just fascinating all the time. Maybe it's a coping technique.
Yeah, it's pretty unusual.
I don't know. But the whole thing was remarkable, and kept me very busy and engaged. But, to become a volunteer during that time was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Wow.
And I still believe that. When I moved to Toronto, right before the pandemic, I started training to become a death doula. And it's something I never would have embarked on had I not discovered hospice volunteering.
This is spooky, because I have been attending the Death Cafe.
Oh, interesting. Yes, they're very popular.
They're really popular. And my curiosity comes from wanting to be really comfortable and helping people pass and helping people die and helping people understand to not be afraid. I really don't think we need to be afraid. And I've really been curious about how to help. I've had a lot of people in my life pass, a lot of friends. In the last 2 years, I've lost 5 people.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's been hard. And that made me want to get better at talking. I have this one friend I remember so clearly. She was days before dying from cancer, and she was still fighting cancer. And I sat with her. I asked my children to leave because they were also there. And I sat with her and I just said, like, this is it, girl. Like, what are you afraid of? Like, what are you holding on to? Like, I need to help you in some way. And it was just this beautiful moment and beautiful experience, because she told me what she was afraid of, and it was all about her boy that she was leaving behind. And to be given the gift of having that conversation with her and to tell her that we were going to take care of her boy, she could let go, because I knew she was holding on. And she went into a coma shortly after I left. And there was part of me that felt really sad that she was so busy fighting, and I get it. I probably would fight to the end too, right? But she didn't get to have much of that possibility of having a beautiful passing where you accept and you know where you're going and you're at peace with it. I mean, she had some peace with dying, but dying is something we just don't talk about in our culture. And yet it's the one thing we can be absolutely certain of. So was it cancer that drew you into this death and dying and being trained to do it? I mean, you're saying it is, but you've stayed with it. So there must be, do you feel enriched by your experiences?
Just like you're describing, there's such a huge need for it. And I mean, you're so lucky it was a friend of yours who you can sit there and be at bedside with. But it's not even that. It's like so many families, there is such a great need, to have someone to, like, so the doula work, just like a birth doula, is for someone to provide anything that's needed, whether it is to sit with a family member, whether it is to sit with the patient, whether it is whatever is needed for that family. Because one thing that I would witness is just like, people aren't comfortable with death and dying. The family would mourn the living all the time surrounding the patient. And there was one girl that we all knew from our chemo team, because we were all in chemo together. I was in a volunteer group, but as well I was in a chemo study group where we were all patients being studied by the sports medicine department at UBC, a whole other long story. And one of the girls had gone into palliative care, and we went to visit her as a group, and her family was there, and they were all so somber and so serious and so quiet. And so she couldn't wait for them to leave. And so they got out, and she was swearing, and she's like, get them the fuck out of here. She was like, oh my God, we're howling. We were hysterically laughing with her in the room. She was just like, they are driving me nuts. She's like, they are just like wailing. She's like, my aunt is wailing, throwing herself on my bed. She's like, let me get her out of here. So it's like you said it. Yeah. Everybody voting, right? I've heard people with someone who's dying in the room saying the most benign things because they don't know what to say. And what they really want to say is, I love you, and we've had so much fun together, and I'm going to miss you, or whatever it is, something real. And yet they're not able to break through that barrier. That's their fear of death, their awkwardness around death. So I love what you're doing. Are you a spiritual person? Very.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it all.
Yeah.
Obviously, I love it all.
So for me, I would love to plan for my death. And I would like that my spiritual needs to be respected. I don't go to church. There's no institution I believe in, but I do believe about a God of my own understanding, a spirit of my own understanding. I believe we're all connected. We're all energy. And I want to make sure that those people that are so uncomfortable with death aren't with me as I pass. And I believe it's sacred. I believe that passing is incredibly important, and blessed would we be if we can have it on our own terms. So wow, we took a tangent,
and she's snoring so loud. I'm like, oh my God. But that's a perfect example when you talk about spiritual. Like, to me, her snoring like connects me honestly to the universe. When I hear her snoring, I just am so happy, because I just think, okay, this small animal is safe. She feels safe. And I just think,
yeah,
the world
was because small animals are
melts away.
Incredibly vulnerable. Nature is a place I connect to spirit a lot.
Yeah.
Water, nature, outdoors, lying on the earth. It's not a church for me. It's everywhere. And, do you have a morning ritual that you go through? Like, do you have any kind of rituals, for lack of a better word, habits that you have that are spiritual in nature, that kind of connect you to your creativity, to your source?
I used to have a lot of rituals when I was younger. I used to get up at 4. I used to meditate. I used to have habits that surrounded lighting candles. And, I would sit. I'm working with a director right now. We have been doing a documentary for 3 years. And Jennifer Abbott is the director. And she sits, she's Zen. She sits zazen for hours. She can sit for hours. And for me, it was more kind of based a little bit more around yoga and stuff. But now I find the older I get, I find that it's much more of a natural thing.
You do connect.
Yeah, and it's something that I don't take it so seriously. I'm very spontaneous as far as that ritual goes. Like I described, with even as simple as my dog snoring, it's something that will snap me out of anything I'm doing.
Yeah, I feel like we learn those routines, right? Like we learn yoga. I mean, I'm into yoga as well. I will never be flexible. Like I'm a strong, muscular rower with really tight hips from all that rowing, and like yoga, it's all about openness, but the spiritual practices and the intentions of yoga have kind of been my entry point into my own spirituality. Yeah. And I think what happens, and not to everybody, but I think even you've had practices in meditation, yoga, and journaling, all these things. Well, first of all, you learn how to connect, you learn how to ground yourself. And there are tools for me that I come back to again and again and again. Like sometimes before I go on stage when I'm speaking, I'll take my shoes off and I'll just, with my bare feet, feel the earth, and I will say, please help me share with this audience what they most need to hear today. And it's just like a second, right? It's just a few seconds, and then I'm there. And what I'm hearing from you is you're out in the world. You actually don't have time to spend 3 hours meditating anymore, because you're out in the world living your spirituality, your meditation, your connection to others by being creative, by helping others as a doula, a death doula, and a whole bunch of other things, including, promoting the rights of animals and the LGBTQ community. You've got a lot going on. So you're doing, and that's your yoga right now.
Service.
That limit.
Yeah.
That limb, I was going to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love it.
When is yet to come for you, do you think?
I hope it's not another husband.
Okay, what you were talking about this, and he said, my ex-husband did not want another dog. And I was like, how could you have ever married somebody who didn't want? You are like the animal whisperer. I mean,
well, I met him after my. I met him after my little senior dog had passed away. I met him like 30 days later. So, and we were moving, so it kind of worked out in that manner. And it was a couple of years that I didn't have a dog. But my best friends, for example, they lost their senior dogs, and within a couple months, my best friend's wife said to them, I'm not going to live in a house with no joy. And that, it made so much sense to me. I was like, that's exactly right. Like, it made so much sense to me, because animals really do bring so much joy to our lives.
Well, you just bringing little Grace in the studio today, everybody here was just, and they're not really listening to us. They're watching the little.
She is hilarious. They're just hilarious. And her two best friends are cats. She has 2 cats that are her best friends. And my manager's home has 4 other little dogs.
You're always having animals.
I will always have animals.
What, you're doing a documentary?
Yes, we're making a documentary for the last 4 years. I don't know what they're going to call it. I don't know.
Is it one of these projects that 4 years, did you say?
We've been shooting for 4 years. They followed us to Paris a couple of times. They followed us to Mexico. They followed us on tour. I don't know what to expect. There's still everything. I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine.
You've written a book. Do you see another book potentially?
I do. And I wrote, before my 50th birthday, I had written a book of poetry. So it was really important for me to write. And then I found that it was very difficult to get a publisher for it.
On poetry?
It was very trauma porn for a lot of the conservative publishers. They could not wrap their heads around publishing this stuff. And I kept it very close to my chest. My book that had been published probably around the same time your book was and I'm sure you feel the same way about your book, because it was 10 years ago almost, and it took 3 years to write and 3 years to edit. So there's a lot that was left out, and there was probably 80,000 words were not even included in that book.
Yeah, and you're kind of a different person than you were.
I feel like a very different person
was 10 years ago.
So now I'm very cautious about publishers, because I just think they're going to edit out all the dirty parts.
But you're still gonna write another book. You're still gonna write another book.
Yeah.
So like you've got more in you.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, because we are talking about books. Like, I love reading.
Me too.
My reading has changed so much. Like when I was younger, I only read fiction. I never read nonfiction. Then I went through this period of time where all I read was nonfiction.
Mm-hmm.
Then I started reading autobiographies. Now I read everything. But I feel like reading is a gift, and there's so much that is opened up through books. Is there a book that you can think of that, like, was a real either aha or wow or caused a shift of perspective?
Well, because my father was such a huge influence for me, so my dad was a dentist, but he's a medical school dropout. So he went to medical school until he discovered the mandible.
Okay.
And then dropped out of medical school and went and became a dentist. So the
mandible was, what did it?
The jaw, yeah. And so all of his medical textbooks he gave to us kids. And so my early tours, I'm so old. We had no computers, no internet, no cell phones, nothing. And so I would take all these medical textbooks on tour. I probably had 70 guides to the MCAT. And that's all I took on tour all the time, because it would shut off my brain.
Well, you were
after shows, and that's all I read. I never read fiction.
Okay.
I never read fiction. I was not familiar with fiction writers or authors.
You read Grey's Anatomy.
All I read was the Merck Manual, basically, and I still love it. I collect ancient and vintage medical and dental textbooks.
Okay, that's eclectic. That's pretty cool.
And Irving Layton poetry books that are all out of print. And now I have had to keep purging my book collection because I keep moving. And I mean, I think the Ivan Coyote is a writer that I like, and Ivan told me a long time ago the key when I was still working on the memoir, and I was lamenting about all these edits that kept happening to my memoir. And Ivan said the key is you need to write it as a fiction. That's where you fell into trouble. You have to write it as a fiction. They can't edit it out.
Okay.
They think it's a fiction.
So maybe your next work will be a work of fiction,
So I always thought, why didn't I think of that?
I want to write a book about my first dog, who unfortunately was named Bimbo.
Plenty.
Little white Maltese terrier that terrorized the neighborhood and used to pick on a Saint Bernard, but that's a whole nother story. What advice would you give your 13-year-old self?
Oh my God.
It's a tough one. I'm sorry.
It's not a tough one.
No, okay.
No, don't drink beer behind the hockey arena in Dauphin, Manitoba, number 1.
Okay.
And don't go with the grade 10 boys to their party, as the 2. And don't worry about what Sherry McNichol calls you in grade 9.
Sherry McNichol.
Yeah, don't worry about all those girls that bore you in full. Like, it's so easy. I remember being 13.
Yeah. Aren't you glad you're not 13?
Well, one of my manager's daughter's 13, and she's just the sweetest, most hilarious, vulnerable kid.
But toughest age, on the stage. And
it's so
you
funny.
don't know what you're going to be. You don't know that it'll work out. You don't know that it's going to be okay. All the stuff you're feeling, all the hormones, all the changes, all the lack of identity, and all the things that happen as a teenager. And I always want to say to kids that are 13, it's going to be okay.
Plus, I smoked.
Oh, you smoked?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So you'd say that
we learned how to flick cigarette butt walking to school. Yeah, Kelly Mitchell taught
That's some good advice. Yeah. Don't smoke. Bev, I think one of the things that I appreciate a lot of things about you, but I think one thing that really stands out for me is your ability to follow your heart, to follow your passions, to push against that box that society has a way of putting us all in.
Mm-hmm.
We all have that version of that box. And you said, like, no, I'm going to be a duck doula. I'm a performer. I'm not just a musician. I can be whatever I want to be. I'm in my 50s and I'm going to have an amazing next decade or whatever, next 2 decades. And I think that's just, it's a marvelous example for other people, especially for other women. And I just want to applaud you for who you are.
Thank you.
I've always been very attracted to your energy and, follow you on social. You're a very intriguing human and you're really good.
Thank you. Coming from you, that means everything. That means everything. Thank you.
Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Thanks for tuning into Inflection Time. I hope our conversation inspired you to think about inflection points in your own life. If you enjoyed our chat, be sure to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It really helps. Remember, every challenge is an opportunity to grow, so keep embracing those turning points. Until next time, I'm Silken Laumann, and this is Inflection Time. I'd like to thank my sponsor, Good Life Fitness, and Tall Boy Water. A big thank you to our incredible guests for sharing their stories with us. I'd also like to thank our fabulous production team, our executive producer, Michelle Archer, our producer, Phil Kluba, and our communications director, Christine Bays. Inflection Time was created by Archer Co., Acronym, and me. As an Olympic athlete, it's not surprising I love working out, and I love going to the gym. Strength training is so important for bone health, for metabolism, and our partner is Good Life Fitness. They are offering a 7-day pass to all of our listeners. Visit our description to access your 7-day pass.